Picture this: Southern Colorado, 1914. A tent colony of striking coal miners and their families wakes to the crack of gunfire. A machine gun mounted on a hill spits hundreds of rounds into the flimsy canvas walls. Mothers clutch their children and dive into pits dug beneath the tents for shelter. Flames race across the camp, consuming everything. When the smoke clears, bodies are discovered in the blackened ruins, men shot, women burned, children suffocated. This is not a scene from a foreign battlefield. This is not a story from some dictatorship overseas. This happened right here in the United States of America. Or think of Chicago, 1886. Workers, exhausted from endless 12-hour shifts, gather to demand something radical, an 8-hour workday. They rally peacefully in Haymarket Square until, suddenly, a bomb explodes. Panic erupts. Police open fire. In the chaos, workers and officers fall. The aftermath is even darker. Labor leaders arrested and executed, not for what they did, but for what they believed. These events, the Ludlow Massacre and the Haymarket Affair, are among the bloodiest and most important labor struggles in American history. And yet, if you went through the public school system, you probably never learned about them. Why? Why is the story of America's workers, the people who laid the railroads, built the factories, mined the coal, and fought for the rights we enjoy today, so often erased from history books? Tonight, we're going to uncover these forgotten chapters. We'll dig into Haymarket, Ludlow, and the bigger question: why are stories of labor's struggle pushed aside, while the tales of tycoons and politicians are celebrated? Stay with me, because once you see what's been left out, you'll never look at American history the same way again. When we imagine the building of America, we often picture founding fathers in powdered wigs, or industrial giants like Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Ford, men credited with creating prosperity. But behind every great man of industry was an army of nameless workers whose sweat, blood, and lives made it all possible. The coal miners who descended miles underground in darkness, knowing every shift could be their last. The factory women who stood in sweltering textile mills, breathing in fibers that scarred their lungs forever. The immigrant laborers, Italians, Poles, Irish, Germans, Chinese, who built railroads across mountains and deserts, who blasted tunnels with dynamite and carried ties on their backs until their spines bent. And the children. This part is often left out. Children as young as 8 or 9, working 12-hour days in glass factories, crawling into dangerous machines to clear jams, or crouching in coal mines too narrow for adults. In photos from the early 1900s, you can see their faces, haunted eyes in dirty, tired bodies. They didn't have time to play, to learn, or to dream. They worked because without their wages, families starved. These were not isolated cases. They were the norm. Safety standards barely existed. If you lost a limb, you were fired. If you were killed, your family was left with nothing. And if you complained, there was always another desperate immigrant waiting to take your place. Out of this reality, labor organizing was born. People realized that alone, they were powerless. But together, they could demand change. They began forming unions. They struck for higher wages, safer workplaces, shorter hours. They risked their jobs, their homes, their freedom. In doing so, they became the backbone of the labor movement. But the movement's victories, child labor laws, weekends, overtime pay, the 8-hour day, were not gifts handed down by kind-hearted employers. They were won through struggle, through bloodshed, through sacrifice. And because of that, They were dangerous stories for those in power. It's easier to celebrate tycoons as visionary heroes than to admit the real story, that workers fought tooth and nail, often against bullets and bayonets, to claim even the most basic dignity. Let's travel back to Chicago, May 1886. The city is alive with noise and tension. Factories belch smoke into the sky. Immigrant families cram into filthy tenements. Workdays stretch 12 to 16 hours. The demand for an 8-hour workday is spreading like wildfire. On May 1st, more than 30,000 workers in Chicago strike. Across the nation, hundreds of thousands join them. It is the largest coordinated labor action in American history to that point. For 3 days, rallies and marches keep pressure high. Then, on May 3rd, at the McCormick Reaper Works, police open fire on strikers, killing several. Anger explodes. Labor leaders call for a protest the next evening at Haymarket Square. The rally on May 4th begins peacefully. A crowd of about 2,000 gathers. Leaders give speeches, many in German, reflecting Chicago's strong immigrant community, calling for justice and condemning police violence. As rain begins to fall, the crowd thins to just a few hundred. Then, as the final speaker is wrapping up, police march in. Their commander orders the crowd to disperse. And then it happens. A bomb is thrown into the police line. The explosion is deafening. Chaos erupts. In the confusion, police open fire wildly into the crowd. Workers scatter in panic. By the time it's over, 7 police officers and at least 4 civilians lie dead, with dozens more wounded. But the real fallout comes afterward. The city's authorities seize the opportunity to crush the labor movement. They arrest 8 anarchists and labor organizers, most of them German immigrants. There is no evidence linking them to the bomb. Even the prosecutors admit they cannot prove who threw it. But the trial becomes a showpiece, designed to silence radicals and terrify workers. All 8 are convicted. 4 are executed by hanging, 1 kills himself in his cell, and 3 are given long prison terms. The world is outraged. Demonstrations erupt in Europe, Latin America, and beyond. The executed men are hailed as martyrs, their words remembered and reprinted worldwide. Out of their blood, International Workers' Day is born. Every May 1st, workers across the globe march in their honor. Everywhere except the United States, where Haymarket becomes a dirty secret, buried in the past. Instead, America creates Labor Day in September, a sanitized, safe holiday stripped of radical origins. To this day, most Americans celebrate a day of rest in September, not knowing the real story began in May, with bombs, bullets, and hangings in the streets of Chicago. Now we move forward to 1913 to 1914, the coalfields of southern Colorado. Here, the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, controlled by the Rockefellers, dominates. For miners, life is grim. They work long shifts in darkness, constantly inhaling coal dust, always at risk of explosions or cave-ins. They're paid in company scrip, forcing them to buy from company-owned stores where prices are high. They live in company-owned housing, so if they strike, they're immediately evicted. In September 1913, 11,000 miners walk out. They demand union recognition, better pay, safer conditions, and the right to live free of company control. The company responds by throwing them out of their homes. Entire families, men, women, children, move into tent colonies set up by the United Mine Workers on the open plains. Winter descends, snow piles around the tents, disease spreads, but the miners endure. Company guards harass them constantly. Strikers carry rifles to defend themselves. Skirmishes erupt. The National Guard is sent in, supposedly to keep order, but in reality, to protect company interests. Tensions mount for months. Then, on April 20th, 1914, all hell breaks loose. Guardsmen set up machine guns on the hills above the Ludlow tent colony. The Death Special, an armored car with a mounted gun, opens fire. Bullets rip through the tents. Families dive into pits dug beneath the canvas for shelter. The attack lasts for hours. By evening, guards set fire to the colony. Flames spread quickly. When it's over, the devastation is revealed. More than 24 are dead. Among them, 2 women and 11 children found suffocated in a pit, their bodies huddled together. The massacre shocks the nation. Newspapers cover it widely. The governor and Rockefeller scramble to defend themselves. Investigations follow. But as outrage fades, so does memory. The Ludlow Massacre becomes a rallying cry for unions, but outside of labor circles, it disappears from mainstream history. Yet its lesson is stark. When workers dared to demand dignity, corporations and the state responded with bullets and fire. Why don't we hear about Haymarket or Ludlow in school? Why are names like Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Ford etched into our memory, while the names of the workers who bled, burned, and were buried are almost entirely forgotten? The answer is simple but unsettling. History is not neutral. History is written by those in power, and the story of America's workers, immigrants, miners, factory hands, and radicals was seen as dangerous. From the late 19th century through the 20th, wealthy industrialists controlled newspapers, politicians, and schools. They were masters not only of business, but of narrative. When Haymarket happened, newspapers called it a riot instead of a massacre. They portrayed anarchists as foreign agitators, as threats to order, rather than as men standing up for justice. When Ludlow happened, early reports were buried in regional papers, then softened with language that described the killings as unfortunate incidents. Imagine for a moment if the textbooks told the truth, that workers in America had to die so you could have a weekend, that families burned so children wouldn't be forced into mines, that the right to an 8-hour day was bought with blood. Such a story shifts our understanding of the nation. It makes us see the tycoons not just as geniuses of industry, but as ruthless exploiters. It makes us question the government's role, not as protectors of freedom, but as protectors of capital. And it makes us realize that ordinary people, not elites, drove progress. Erasing that story keeps us passive. It suggests that improvements in society flow from the top down, rather than from the bottom up. There's a reason America celebrates Labor Day in September instead of May. Grover Cleveland signed the September holiday into law just days after federal troops killed workers in the Pullman strike of 1894. He knew the public was angry. He wanted a way to cool tensions, to honor labor, without acknowledging the radical origins of May Day, which by then had spread worldwide as a commemoration of Haymarket. So America got a sanitized version, a picnic holiday, detached from struggle, made safe for the status quo. In Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, May Day is a day of marches, protests, demands. In America, we fire up the grill. This erasure is not just about holidays, it's about memory. If you don't remember that things were won through struggle, you're more likely to accept their loss. If you believe weekends, safety standards, or overtime were gifts, you won't fight when they're rolled back. And that is the real reason labor history has been erased. Because memory is power. And those who benefit from forgetting know that silence is their best defense. Despite attempts to erase it, the memory of worker struggle survives. In monuments, in traditions, in whispers passed down through families. In Chicago, the Haymarket Martyrs Monument still stands in Forest Home Cemetery. It bears the names of men executed not for throwing a bomb, but for daring to demand justice. Workers from around the world still visit, laying flowers, raising fists, leaving notes. In Colorado, the Ludlow site has been preserved. The United Mine Workers erected a stone monument there, marking the pit where women and children suffocated in 1914. Survivors and their descendants return each year, not just to mourn, but to remind the world that what happened in Ludlow was not an accident. It was a message, one that said, "This is what happens when workers stand against power." Beyond these sites, the legacy lives in every labor struggle since, when teachers march for smaller class sizes and better pay, when nurses walk out demanding safe staffing levels, when warehouse workers push for air conditioning and fair wages. They echo the voices of those who gathered in Haymarket Square and those who died in Ludlow's flames. The very language of labor, the strike, the picket line, solidarity, was forged in those earlier struggles, but the legacy is also a warning. Every right can be undone. The 8-hour day, the 40-hour week, overtime pay, protections against child labor, all of them were once unthinkable demands. Now they're considered normal. But with corporate power rising again, with union membership at historic lows, and with many workers classified as contractors rather than employees, those rights are under threat. The lesson is clear. Progress is never permanent. It must be defended, and defense requires memory. That's why telling these stories matters, not just to honor the dead, but to strengthen the living, to remind us that history is not just about presidents and generals. It's about workers, about people like us, who stood together and changed the world, even when bullets and bayonets were aimed at their backs. So let's come back to the question we began with. Why don't we learn about Haymarket and Ludlow? Is it because they're inconvenient? Because they show a side of America that doesn't fit the narrative of progress and prosperity? Or is it because remembering them would empower us to act today? If you've made it this far, you now know a truth that millions of Americans never hear. You know that our weekends, our work hours, our safety rules were not gifts. They were victories, paid for with blood, with fire, with sacrifice. And you know that forgetting those victories makes it easier to lose them. The next time you punch a clock, or take a Saturday off, or get paid overtime, think about the nameless workers in Chicago and Colorado. Think about the children in the coal mines who never lived to see their struggle bear fruit. Think about the families who dug pits under their tents, hoping to survive a rain of bullets. And then ask yourself, who benefits from your forgetting? History isn't just about the past. It's about power in the present. By remembering, we keep that power alive. By telling these stories, we refuse to let them be erased. Now, I want to hear from you. What did you think about today's video? Was this your first time hearing about Haymarket or Ludlow? Do you think America deliberately hides its labor history, or is it simply neglected? Comment your thoughts and suggestions for the next episode below. Because the more we uncover these hidden truths, the harder it becomes to silence them again. And that's the real, untold secret of American history. Memory is resistance.